All right, so get this. We're diving into robot lawnmowers
Yeah,
today.
robot
Yeah.
lawnmowers.
Specifically a study about them, not just, any study about robot lawnmowers.
Mm-hmm.
This was done by Sofia Luglio and her team
Okay.
and published in Applied Sciences in 2023.
Interesting.
When I first saw this, I was like, robots and lawn, those two things don't really seem like they'd go together. But
Right.
apparently researchers are testing out how these little bots handle keeping our lawns nice and trim.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. It's more than just can they cut grass. This study really dives deep into the impact of these robots, how
Yeah.
they move, how often they mow, and what that all means for the health of the lawn itself.
So not just can it cut, but can it cut well and do it in a way that's actually good for the lawn?
Exactly.
So where did they even do this research? Was it some super high-tech lab?
Not quite. They set it up at the University of Pisa Center for Research on Turf Grass.
Okay.
So we're in Italy.
Makes sense.
Picture a typical Mediterranean lawn, a mix of hybrid Bermuda grass and Dallas grass.
Okay.
Not fancy, pretty standard for that area.
So they're really trying to see how these robots handle a real-world lawn,
Exactly.
not some perfectly manicured golf course.
Right.
Interesting. Okay, so they've got the setting.
Yeah.
Now, what about the robots themselves? What kind of robots were they using?
They tested two different models, actually, both from Husqvarna,
Okay.
the 450X and the 535 AWD.
All right, so two different kinds. Tell me about them.
Well, the 450X, that's your more basic model, smaller and lighter, moves in a fairly straightforward pattern.
Okay.
The 535 AWD, that's the bigger brother, heavier four-wheel drive.
Ooh, fancy.
Yeah, for getting around obstacles and stuff.
Okay, so we've got our contenders, we've got our arena. How do they keep track of these things?
That's where it gets really cool.
Okay.
They use something called RTK GPS to track their every move.
RTK GPS, what is that?
It's like a super precise GPS system, but for robots. They could see exactly where each robot went, how far it traveled, even how many times they crossed paths.
Wow, so it's like Big Brother for lawnmowers.
Kind of.
But, why track all of that?
Yeah.
What were they looking to find out by tracking all this movement?
It all comes down to understanding how these robots impact the lawn, you see.
Okay.
They were looking at things like how much the robots trampled the grass, how
Yeah.
compact the soil got, and how that affected the overall health and look of the lawn.
Hold on, trampling levels. Do they have the robots doing a robotic lawnmower mosh pit or something?
Haha, not quite a mosh pit, but you're on the right track.
Yeah.
They essentially controlled how long each robot mowed a specific area
Okay.
to simulate different mowing schedules. Think of it as a trampling test.
Gotcha.
They had a control group, with a quick 10-minute mow,
Okay.
then groups with 30 minutes, 60 minutes, and even a whopping 90 minutes of mowing time.
Oh, wow. So they're really putting these robots through their paces. They're really trying to see if these things constantly zipping around are actually good or bad for the lawn in the long run.
Exactly, and they found some pretty interesting results, especially when it came to those edges.
Ooh, a cliffhanger.
Yeah, we'll have to save that for part 2.
All right, well, stay tuned, everybody.
Yeah.
We'll be right back with more on the fascinating world of robot lawnmowers.
So those edges, right? You might think robots would mow in these perfect lines.
Yeah, you'd think so.
But it turns out they spend a lot of time turning around,
Okay.
especially at the edges of the lawn.
So like a little robot traffic jam happening at the edge of your lawn.
Exactly, and all that turning, it takes its toll.
Oh, really?
The edges were noticeably more compacted than the center of the lawn, regardless of which robot was doing the mowing.
But didn't they use two different robots for this? Did they both have that same problem with the edges?
Yeah, they did. And you would think that the heavier 535 AWD, the one with all-wheel drive,
Yeah.
you'd think it would handle the turns better, maybe be a little easier on the grass.
Right.
But surprisingly, it actually caused slightly more compaction than the lighter 450X.
Huh. So even with the fancy tech, sometimes the lighter touch is better. I guess a good reminder that bigger isn't always better.
Right.
So compacted edges aside, what about the overall quality of the lawn? Like, did these robot mowers actually do a good job cutting the grass, making it look nice?
That's where the study gets really interesting.
Oh,
They didn't just look at how compacted the soil was. They also looked at, the color of the grass, how dense it was, and even used something called NDVI to measure how healthy the plants were.
NDVI, what is that?
Imagine you're looking at your lawn from space.
Okay.
NDVI. It's basically like a satellite's way of seeing how green and healthy your lawn is.
Okay.
It measures how much light the plants are reflecting, which, that tells us a lot about their overall health.
So higher score good, lower score bad.
Pretty much.
So what kind of scores did these robots get? Did they pass the test?
Well, this is where it gets interesting again.
Good.
Despite all that trampling, especially at the edges,
Yeah.
the lawn quality remained acceptable.
So they pass.
Yeah. I mean, they weren't award-winning lawns,
Right.
but they weren't struggling either.
Okay.
And remember, this was a low-maintenance grass mix, so it was built to withstand a bit of, wear and tear.
Right. Makes sense. So the robots weren't giving these lawns like a spa day or anything, but they weren't exactly destroying them either.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not bad for a bunch of machines just running around doing their own thing.
Yeah. And there was a difference between the two models, too.
Really? How
The
so?
535 AWD, remember the heavier one?
Yeah.
It consistently scored higher in terms of both color and overall appearance.
Interesting. Why is that? Do we know?
The researchers think it might have to do with the way the 535 AW moves compared to the 450X.
Okay, how do they move differently?
Well, think of it this way. The 535 AWD, it has 4 wheels that all move independently.
Mm-hmm.
The 450X has this front wheel that pivots,
Okay.
which can sometimes drag along the ground as it turns. And that dragging, it can actually damage the grass a little bit, lead to a less vibrant color. Ah, I see. So it's like the difference between, gently combing your hair versus giving it a rough tug. The 535 was definitely being gentler on the grass, even though it was heavier.
Exactly.
So that's the quality aspect. But what about energy use? I mean, aren't these robots constantly sucking up power?
Well, that's one of the big selling points of these things, actually.
Okay.
They're surprisingly energy efficient.
Even when they're mowing for long periods.
Yeah, even at the highest trampling level,
Mm.
the robots used a fraction of the energy compared to a gas mower over the same period.
So you're saying these robots are like the electric cars of lawn care?
Kind of, yeah.
Saving energy and, maybe even helping the environment a bit in the long run. But I know those electric cars have their own environmental impacts. So what about the robots? Are they truly green?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And honestly, one that this study doesn't really address.
Right.
I mean, we need to look at the whole picture, right? The manufacturing process, the materials used, what happens to these robots at the end of their life, So it's not just about what happens on the lawn, but about, the bigger picture, the whole life cycle of the product.
Exactly.
That makes sense. Well, we've covered a lot of ground here,
We have.
from robot traffic jams to the science of healthy lawns.
Yeah.
I'm starting to feel like a robot lawnmower expert myself.
Mm.
It's funny, we started out talking about robots,
Yeah.
but we've ended up talking a lot about lawns,
It's true.
about how they grow, how they thrive, even how they get stressed out.
Well, it is all connected, you see. I mean, these robots are forcing us to rethink, what a lawn is, how we care for it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just about, whacking it down every weekend.
Right.
It's about understanding the science behind it all.
Yeah, and maybe even appreciating the little things.
I like it.
My nicely mowed edge or that vibrant green color.
Mm-hmm.
Things we might take for granted when we're just focused on getting the job done.
It's easy to forget about those things.
And this study, with all its focus on robots and, measurements and all that,
Right.
it actually brings us back to the basics.
Yeah.
Back to the relationship between humans and nature.
In a way. Yeah.
That's what I love about these deep dives.
What's that?
They always seem to lead to unexpected places.
That's true.
We start with a study about robot lawnmowers and end up talking about, the future of lawn care, the environment,
Yeah.
even our own connection to nature.
It's all part of the bigger picture.
It really is. So next time I see one of those robots zipping around the lawn,
Yeah.
I'm not just going to see a gadget,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to see a little ambassador for a whole new way of thinking about our relationship with the natural world.
I like that.
And maybe even a reminder to slow down a bit.
Yeah.
Appreciate the details. Consider the impact of our choices, even when it comes to something, seemingly simple, like mowing the lawn.
Well said. I think that's a perfect note to end on.
I think so, too.
Well,
Thanks for joining me on this deep dive. It's been fascinating. And to you, dear listener, thanks for tuning in. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those lawns looking sharp, whether you've got a robot helper or not.
absolutely.
Until next time.